Hollywood star. Jon Bernthal forced off. Jimmy Kimmel. Live after host's cruel jokes. Go too far. What began as a simple interview turned into the talk show meltdown of the year as tensions exploded on national television last night. The bright studio lights of Jimmy Kimmel Live shone down on what should have been just another celebrity interview. Jon Bernthal, the tough guy actor known for his roles in The Punisher and The Walking Dead, sat smiling in the guest chair, ready to talk about his new action film, Final Strike. Nobody could have guessed that the next 15 minutes would change late-night television forever. Welcome back. My next guest is an actor who punches people for a living, both on screen and maybe off-screen too, who knows? Jimmy Kimmel said with a smirk that seemed a little sharper than usual. Please welcome Jon Bernthal. The audience cheered as Jon walked out, giving high fives to fans in the front row. He wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans, casual but cool. Jon smiled and waved before settling into the chair across from Jimmy. Great to be here, Jimmy. Thanks for having me back, Jon said, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, relaxed and friendly. So, Jon, this new movie, it's about a guy who hits things, played by a guy who hits things. Pretty deep casting. There, Jimmy said with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jon chuckled politely. Well, there's a bit more to it than that. My character is actually a former soldier dealing with returning to civilian life and— Right, Jimmy interrupted, waving his hand. But let's talk about something more interesting. I heard you almost got fired from your last project because you couldn't remember your lines. Is that why there's so little talking in this one? The audience's laughter turned awkward as Jon's smile faded slightly. He shifted in his seat. That's not true at all, Jimmy. Where did you hear that? Oh, Hollywood talks, Jimmy said with a dismissive gesture. Especially about actors who maybe aren't known for their, let's say, intellectual contributions to film. The camera caught Jon's jaw tightening, but his voice remained steady. I work really hard on every role, Jimmy. This film actually has a pretty meaningful story about veterans, which is why I took it. Sure, Jimmy nodded, checking his notes. Speaking of taking things, isn't it true that you took martial arts lessons for this role, but the instructor asked you to leave because you couldn't keep up with the kids' class? The audience gasped. Jon blinked, clearly caught off guard. No, that's completely made up. I've trained in boxing for years and— That's not what I heard, Jimmy pressed, leaning forward. I also heard your co-stars had a nickname for you on set. What was it again? One Take Wonder? But not in a good way, because you needed like 50 takes to get anything right? The studio grew uncomfortably quiet. Jon took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly together. Look, Jimmy, I don't know what's going on tonight, but these aren't funny jokes. They're just untrue. I'm happy to talk about the movie or real stuff from my life, but making up stories that make me look bad isn't cool. Jimmy laughed loudly, slapping his desk. Oh, come on, don't be so sensitive. This is just what we do here. Can't take a joke? There's a difference between jokes and just saying false things about someone's career, Jon replied, his voice still calm but firmer now. I respect what you do, but I'd appreciate the same respect back. Respect? In Hollywood? Jimmy raised his eyebrows dramatically for the camera. Isn't this the same Jon Bernthal who supposedly stormed off the set of— what was that show? The one that got canceled after 3 episodes? Was that because of your famous temper? Jon uncrossed his legs and sat up straight, the muscles in his neck tensed visibly. Jimmy, I've never had a show canceled after 3 episodes. I don't know why you're saying these things, but they're not true, and honestly, not funny either. What's not funny is how your last movie bombed so badly they had to pull it from theaters after a weekend, Jimmy shot back, then turned to the audience. Isn't that right, folks? I mean, the reviews called it a career-ending performance. The audience barely responded, many looking uncomfortable. The camera caught several people exchanging concerned glances. Jon placed his hands on his knees, looking directly at Jimmy. My last film actually did pretty well and the reviews were good. I don't understand what's happening right now, but this isn't the conversation I came here to have. Well, it's the conversation I want to have, Jimmy replied, his tone suddenly cold. Because let's be honest, without the tough guy act, what do you really bring to the table as an actor? One-dimensional characters played by a one-dimensional actor, right? A wave of murmurs rippled through the audience. Jon's expression hardened, but he kept his composure. I've played all kinds of roles in my career, Jimmy. I'm proud of my work. But right now, I'm wondering why you'd invite me on your show just to insult me with made-up stories. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, smirking. Maybe because ratings go up when guests get angry? Come on, show us that famous Bernthal temper everyone talks about backstage. The studio fell completely silent as Jon stood up slowly, towering over Jimmy's desk. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. What would happen next? Would Jon lose his cool on national television, or would Jimmy back down from his unexpected attack? I'm not going to give you that satisfaction, Jimmy, Jon said, his voice level but intense. I've played enough characters to know when someone's trying to create drama for views. Jimmy's smirk faltered just a bit. He hadn't expected Jon to stay so composed. Come on, we're just having fun here, Jimmy said, adjusting his tie nervously. The audience loves it when things get a little heated, right, folks? He turned to the crowd, but was met with uncomfortable silence and a few scattered, hesitant claps. Jon remained standing, looking down at Jimmy. No, this isn't fun. This is you making up lies about my career and trying to embarrass me on your show. There's a big difference between playful teasing and what you're doing. A bead of sweat appeared on Jimmy's forehead. The cameras caught it all, the host squirming while the guest maintained perfect composure. Let's get back to your movie, Jimmy tried, shuffling his note cards. I hear there's a big explosion scene that... I'd rather talk about what's happening right now, Jon cut in, his eyes never leaving Jimmy. Because I think your viewers deserve to know why you're treating a guest this way. Did I do something to upset you before the show? Jimmy laughed nervously. Of course not. This is just how we do interviews here. Keep things spicy, you know? No, it's not, Jon replied firmly. I've been on your show 3 times before, and you've never acted like this. Something's different tonight. The camera panned to the audience, capturing their stunned expressions. This wasn't the light-hearted, late-night entertainment they had expected. This was real conflict unfolding live. Jimmy's producer could be seen frantically signaling from the side of the stage, drawing a finger across her throat, the universal sign to cut to commercial. But Jimmy ignored her. Fine. You want the truth? Jimmy's voice took on an edge. People think you're this tough guy, this authentic actor who keeps it real. But I've heard things, Jon, about how you treat crew members on set, about the tantrums when you don't get your way. Jon's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his calm exterior. That's completely false. Ask anyone I've worked with. Really? Because I have texts from someone on your last film who says differently, Jimmy said, holding up his phone. Want me to read them? The audience gasped. Jon's hands clenched into fists at his sides, then slowly relaxed. Those texts either don't exist or they're not about me, Jon said. I pride myself on how I treat crews. They're the hardest working people in this business. That's not what I heard, Jimmy pressed, scrolling through his phone. According to this, you made a makeup artist cry because she couldn't cover a scar properly. Jon shook his head, a sad smile crossing his face. Now I understand what's happening. You're thinking of someone else. I don't have any scars that need covering with makeup. A murmur went through the audience. Jimmy's face flushed red as he quickly put his phone down. Well, my sources, Jimmy started. Your sources are wrong, Jon interrupted. And I think you know it. The question is why you're doing this. Is it for ratings? Are you mad that I turned down an earlier invitation because I was filming? The camera zoomed in on Jimmy's face as he struggled to maintain his usual confident demeanor. For once, the king of late night looked rattled. "Look, Jon, maybe things got a little out of hand," Jimmy said, trying to regain control. "Let's move on and talk about your charity work. You've been involved with helping veterans, right?" "Yes, but I'm not done addressing what just happened," Jon said firmly, still standing. "You don't get to make up stories about me, try to damage my reputation, and then just change the subject when it doesn't work out." The audience broke into spontaneous applause, surprising both men on stage. Jon looked out at them, nodding in appreciation. "I respect what you do, Jimmy," Jon continued when the clapping died down. "I've always enjoyed being on your show, but tonight feels personal, like you're trying to provoke me into becoming the stereotype of the angry tough guy." Jimmy shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "It's just entertainment, Jon. People tune in for a little drama." "No, people tune in to see genuine conversations with people they're interested in," Jon countered. "Not whatever this is." A production assistant rushed onto the stage, handing Jimmy a note. He read it quickly, his expression darkening further. "We need to go to commercial," Jimmy announced abruptly. "We'll be right back with more from Jon Bernthal." "Will we, though?" Jon asked quietly as the applause sign flashed. "Because I'm not sure I want to continue this interview." The show cut to commercial, but the studio cameras kept rolling. The audience members pulled out their phones, recording everything. This wasn't in the script. This was real drama unfolding before their eyes. Behind his desk, Jimmy stood up, removing his microphone. "What the hell, man? You're making me look bad on my own show." Jon stood his ground. "You did that yourself, Jimmy. I came here to promote a film I'm proud of, not to be your punching bag." The show's executive producer rushed onto the stage, whispering urgently to Jimmy, occasionally glancing nervously at Jon. "Social media is blowing up," an assistant said loudly enough for the front rows to hear. "Clips are already going viral." Jon checked his own phone, eyebrows rising at what he saw. "Trending #1 already. That was fast." Jimmy's face had gone from red to pale. "Look, when we come back from commercial, I'll apologize, and we can start over." Jon stared at him for a long moment, considering the offer. The audience watched, with bated breath, wondering what would happen when the cameras started rolling again. Jon stared at him for a long moment, considering the offer. The audience watched with bated breath, wondering what would happen when the cameras started rolling again. "I appreciate the offer to apologize," Jon finally said, "but I think we're past that point now. This wasn't just a joke that went wrong. You came prepared with false stories about me." Jimmy ran his hand through his hair, visibly stressed. "It was just supposed to be entertaining. The researchers gave me these notes." He waved a blue index card. Jon took the card from Jimmy's hand and read it, his expression darkening. "This isn't about me at all. These stories are about Jason Statham," Jon said, holding up the card for others to see. "You or your team mixed us up and didn't even bother to check." A shocked murmur ran through the audience. One of the production assistants covered her face in embarrassment. "And even if these stories were about Jason, which I doubt they are, this would still be a terrible way to treat a guest," Jon continued, handing the card back. The floor director started counting down. "We're back in 10, 9, 8. "So, what's it going to be?" Jimmy asked hurriedly. "Are you staying or going?" 7, 6, 5. Jon looked out at the audience, then back at Jimmy. "I'll stay on one condition. We talk about the real issue here, how media treats people for entertainment." 4, 3. "Fine," Jimmy agreed quickly. 2, 1. The on-air sign lit up, and the cameras rolled once more. Both men were still standing. "Welcome back to Jimmy Kimmel Live," Jimmy said, forcing a smile. "As you might have noticed, things got a little heated before the break between me and my guest, Jon Bernthal." Jon stood with his arms crossed, waiting. "I want to take a moment to apologize to Jon," Jimmy continued. What was supposed to be playful banter clearly crossed a line, and I said things that weren't accurate. Thank you, Jon nodded, but remained standing. I appreciate that, Jimmy, but I think there's a bigger conversation here. Jimmy gestured toward the guest chair. Please, sit back down and let's have that conversation. Jon returned to his seat, his posture straight and alert. What happened tonight happens all the time in media. Someone decides they want drama at someone else's expense. They push buttons hoping for an explosive reaction they can turn into viral clips. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. You're right, Jimmy admitted, looking uncomfortable but sincere. Tonight was about getting a reaction from you. We literally had a meeting where someone said, "What if we can get the tough guy to lose his cool on air?" And how did that work? Out? Jon asked. A few people in the audience chuckled nervously. Not as planned, Jimmy conceded. But I think we accidentally stumbled into something more interesting. Can we talk about why you didn't react the way we expected? Most people would have blown up. Jon leaned forward. Because I'm not the character I play, and because losing your cool rarely solves anything. My dad always taught me that real strength isn't about throwing punches. It's about knowing when not to. The audience broke into applause. But let's be clear, Jon continued when the clapping died down. This isn't about me being some perfect guy with endless patience. This is about basic respect. Everyone deserves that, whether they're on TV or not. Jimmy nodded, surprisingly humble now. You're right, and I failed at that tonight. Completely failed. We all make mistakes, Jon said. The question is what we learn from them. The tension in the studio had transformed into something different, not gone, but changed into a shared understanding that something important was happening. So, Jimmy said, your new movie. It's about a veteran coming home, right? Maybe that's actually relevant to what we're talking about. How people expect certain behavior based on stereotypes. For the first time that night, Jon smiled genuinely. That's exactly what the film explores. My character is fighting against everyone's expectations that he's just an angry, violent ex-soldier. But he's struggling to find a different path. That actually sounds really good, Jimmy said, sounding sincere for once. And clearly you connect with that theme personally. The interview shifted into authentic territory, with both men discussing stereotypes, public perception, and the film's deeper messages. The audience remained captivated, witnessing something rare on late-night TV. A genuine conversation born from conflict. As the segment came to its scheduled end, Jimmy extended his hand. Thanks for staying, Jon. You could have walked out and nobody would have blamed you. Jon shook his hand firmly. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the most important. Ones? The audience erupted into the loudest applause of the night as the show cut to its final commercial break. Backstage afterward, crew members approached Jon one by one, thanking him for how he handled the situation. Many apologized for their part in the planned ambush. No hard feelings, Jon told them. We all have jobs to do. As Jon was leaving the building, Jimmy caught up with him in the parking lot, away from cameras and crowds. Hey, Jimmy said, looking more genuine than he had all night. I really am sorry. That wasn't who I want to be. Jon studied him for a moment. We all have bad days, man. The question is, what happens tomorrow? Tomorrow I'm going to do better, Jimmy said. And I owe you one. Just be straight with people, Jon replied. That's all anyone can ask. They parted with another handshake, firmer and more meaningful than the one on camera. By morning, the exchange had become the most watched late-night clip in years. But not for the reasons the producers had planned. Instead of "Actor melts down on Kimmel," the headlines read, "Bernthal shows true strength in face-to-face confrontation," and "Kimmel's ambush backfires as Bernthal takes high road." The incident sparked wider discussions about media ethics, respect for guests, and the difference between entertainment and exploitation. Several other talk show hosts publicly committed to treating their guests with more dignity. As for Jon's film, it opened to record numbers that weekend, with many viewers citing the Kimmel interview as what drew them to the theater. Sometimes, the best publicity comes from simply being yourself when everyone expects you to be someone else. And Jimmy? The following night, he opened his show with a longer, more heartfelt apology, not just to Jon, but to all the guests he'd treated similarly over the years. It was the beginning of a different approach to comedy, one based on wit rather than embarrassment. In Hollywood, where fake drama is manufactured daily, the most powerful moment turned out to be one of genuine human connection, found in the last place anyone expected it.